Hello and welcome to Hair in the Hawthorn. I'm your host. I'm Kate Ray. I've also got the lovely Neil Rushton with me. I'm hoping he's on that side. He might be on that side. Who knows? So we decided that we're going to come back together to say Happy New Year to you all and to go through some of the highlights from last year and a little bit the year before. One of the things that we have discovered that we don't do on a regular enough basis is to go back and address some of your comments, because we do read all the comments, we go through them, we love going through them, and it's definitely nice to see familiar faces time after time putting up some really strong comments, interesting comments on there. So I just want to go through some of the topics that we went through last year just as a roundup for us. Really, it was an amazing year, and although I feel like we maybe didn't do as much as we could have done, we actually did tons. We actually did tons last year. So a bit of a pat on the back for Neil as well, for coming back and suffering, sitting on the couch with me and helping me interview some fantastic guests. So some of the things that we covered last year, we did the Woollerton Gnomes, we did book reviews. There was lots of high strangeness that went on in the videos last year, not only with interviewing people and getting their feedback about what they were writing about or what they were doing in their lives, but also on camera. You know, we captured EVPs and we've had light anomalies while we've actually been recording, which has been fantastic. We've had a running theme of death and dying, which I'm sounding quite upbeat when I'm saying, and perhaps I should say it, death and dying, you know, so it's a bit more somber, but that's definitely been a theme. We've had people and guests come on and talk about folklore. We've had past life regression on there, and we've had individual cases from people as well who have come forward and talked to us about the experiences that they've been through. Before I chuck things over to Neil, I just want to go through some of the fantastic guests we've had. I mean, I can't mention everybody who's been on the last sort of year and a blip, but there are some characters that I do want to mention. All these you can find in the videos below this post. If you go through historically, there are many videos, all of them fantastic quality guests, and I'm not just saying that. These people have been absolutely brilliant. So we've had Dr. Jack Hunter on, we've had the lovely Joe Hickey Hall, we've had Claire Casey, who is amazing, we've had David Halping come and talk to us, we've had Anthony Peake, who I just went poof, when mind blew and felt like I was a very little fish in a very large pond at that stage, but it was fantastic. We had Joshua Cutchins, we've also had the amazing Dr. David Luke, and we've had the fantastic and very Pixie-esque Dan Green. And they're just some of the guests that we've had here on Hair in the Hawthorn. All of them blew me away. And to be honest, it takes me a while to re-watch the interviews that I've done, and that we've sat and talked to people. Because I like to go back with a fresh view on each topic and listen as a listener. And the second part of it is because I hate the sound of my own voice. I think everybody does. So it takes me a while to get over myself. But when I have rewatched these interviews, and I think me and Neil were, you know, bigging each other up. I think it was last night, and we're saying these are bloody good, you know. And it's not for us that they're good; it's our guests. You know, we have some quality people time and time again who have just been insane and said, yeah, they're going to come back and chat to us, or yes, they're fine to chat to us. So one of the ones that really stood out for me, and I'm reading notes, it's the first time I've actually written notes for a long time on this, was the interview that we did with Joshua Cutchins, and me and Neil will have a chat about that in a little while. Just want to go through some of the comments for me that stood out, and I think as a whole, the love, if you like, and the overall kind of encouragement that we're getting from people in the comments, it really helps us. It really helps sort of propel us on and keep us going. People are incredibly complimentary on a platform where you don't need to be. I mean, we haven't seen hide nor hair of any trolls in a long while. In the early days, we had one or two trolls. Don't mind a few trolls. It's fairyland here and all that. So some of the comments that we've had that have been in that vein have been things like people have been excited for the new show. That was Persephone Lewis who said that. Or love the show. I find your accent delightful, so keep talking. I think that was probably from one of our American listeners, because if you're in this country, my accent isn't quite delightful. It's a bit it's a bit Midlandery. So I'm going to chuck you over to Neil. Hi, Neil. I've rampaged on there. Again, thank you for coming back and sitting with me as a co-host. How are you doing?
Thank you, Kate. I'm doing okay, actually. I thought you were just going to go on for the entire video there. I was about to leave. Yeah, well, what you've said is true. I think we've had, I mean, since we've been doing this together, we've had, is it 7 or 8 guests on whatever the guests that you've just read out, and I'd like to reiterate what you're saying about the quality of these guests. They're all extremely knowledgeable, they are articulate, and are able to give a different perspective. All of them are coming from different perspectives on this particular phenomenon. And again, to a further reiteration of what you've said about the comments, when we get into this, I will read out the one sort of negative comment that I could find. I went through all of the videos yesterday for the first time in a while and realized, this is really good quality stuff. And then looking at the comments and the compliments, I'll read out a few for specific interviews in a moment. And people like it. People seem to like what we're doing, and I think what we're doing is a little bit different than any other similar podcasts. I mean, in the last few years, there's been quite a few podcasts about the fairy phenomenon, but I just believe that we're coming at it from a slightly different perspective, and that's mostly due to the guests that we are able to get on. And I'd just like to take the opportunity, if any of those guests are watching, to say thank you for giving up your time. Obviously, we can't afford to pay anyone to come on the channel. They give up their time freely, very generously, and so just a big thank you to
And everybody's been so much fun as well. Everybody that we've had on has really got into the spirit of it, because I think we are very laid back, a bit seat of our pants with recording. For those of you who don't know, we don't edit. We just run through on the record, and whatever happens, and whatever goes, really. So people have been incredibly accepting of that. And I think just to go back to what you were saying, Neil, one of the things that I love about this show is the fact that both of us are very accepting from sort of all sectors of thinking, and sort of all different kind of levels of input into academia or not. It's been about, let's get a broader view of what's going off within specifically the fairy phenomena, and given that breadth that it's deserving of, and these guests have certainly done that. Is there anybody or any particular part of an interview that's really stood out for you?
Oh, we shouldn't pin down, because if you say, oh well, he or she was fantastic, the other's going to
Yeah.
think, oh right, so they were better than me.
Yeah.
I would say, okay, I'm going to be equivocal, and I'm going to sit on the fence for that question. And I'm going to say there were several parts of all of the interviews where I was thinking, this is either new information or you're coming at this from a completely different angle. All of the people we've interviewed, I knew beforehand, so I knew where they were sort of going to be coming from. But even so, there was bits and pieces within those interviews where I was thinking, my goodness, I just hadn't thought of that. That's new information for me, and so that was always pleasing. I mentioned a couple of comedy moments. Seeing everyone's, you're talking about everyone being in the spirit of things. The first interview we did together, which was actually 2021, when Kate asked me to co-host for the first time was with Dr. David Luke at the University of Greenwich, who's a fabulous guy. I'll talk about his interview in a moment. But the best thing about David was that during the interview, he cracked open 2 cans of beer.
Yeah.
As we were talking, I thought that's pretty impressive. No, I like that. You're a good bloke. Don't care what don't care what you say. You know, that's absolutely fantastic. And then so that's the first one. And the last interview, well, the most recent interview we've done was with Joshua Cutchin. And when we brought up the subject of the late great Terence McKenna, Joshua amazingly came out with a perfect impression of Terence McKenna's very nasally sort of New York accent, a very distinctive voice, and it was a perfect impression. And it was funny. It was just a comedy gold.
Yeah.
And I remember asking Kate to do her impression of Terence McKenna, but she was having none of it.
I would have blown him out of the water, Neil. I would have put him to shame with my. No, I'm not doing it. I'm sorry. I don't get paid enough to do impressions.
Shall I try to do it? Yeah. We are bungee jumping into the Bardo.
It's not bad. I think Joshua's was better.
It's better. Yeah. So sorry to be a bit sort of frivolous, but that is part of what we're doing. It's not some sort of serious academic style podcast. It can get serious, but because some of the subject matter is serious and it needs some deep thought about it. But at the same time, it's also a bit of a laugh, isn't it? It's we want to keep things as light as possible. And what viewers of the videos don't see the extras that Kate and I talking to the person we're interviewing before and afterwards. And for the one I remember for that was Anthony Peake, who very generously stayed on for an extra 40 minutes, and we just had a chat, and it was amazing. It was an amazing chat. Anthony Peake's a great talker. We'll talk about him in a moment, but very generous with his time, and somehow we probably need to include we could call it Hare and the Hawthorne extra, where things are a little bit less rigid, and it's basically just us having a bit of a chat without too much worries about going from one subject to another and fitting things in a time scale. So that's a possibility for the future. I hate to throw that at you, Kate.
No, it's great. No, it's great idea. I think I'm with you on those chats afterwards have just been absolute gold. And to be fair, if we could have got those out there to air them on they would have been absolutely brilliant, because they were very relaxed. And I suppose that both of us are very conscious about not talking over people, because we get excited about something, because it doesn't flow very well when people are watching. Those kind of after extras, we're able to do that. We're able to say, oh wow, what about this one, and sort of really get into a passionate discussion about stuff, which is me and Neil are actually quite reserved. When you see us in this kind of format, we are quite reserved than we normally are when we're sort of chatting normally. We're not that far removed, but we have a professionalism.
Do we?
Yeah.
You haven't told me about that. So what about you? What are your just a few highlights?
I think and this is not a cop out at all. I have been absolutely blown away with the caliber of understanding, and not only that, the commitment that every single guest that we've had on has had for their subject. That kind of passionate commitment to what they're doing, and then wanting to share it. And also, every one of those guests, nobody has been closed off to anything that I might have felt was a stupid question, or they've not been closed off to, have you thought about this? None of them have kind of been like, well, yes, I have, and just brushed it off. Everybody's been incredibly open, incredibly relaxed about how they've spoken to us. I think for me, the one thing that I will always love about these interviews, I do love the academic side. I do love people talking about the research and what they're doing and what the findings are. The bit that I love the most, the gems for me, are those personal experiences. Especially when you get academics that are talking to you in that kind of modus, really, about the research, and then you kind of throw them that curveball of have you experienced anything, and nobody has been sort of put off or sidetracked by that. Everybody has been incredibly forthcoming with their own personal experiences, and they are true gems. And the experiences that they have are life-changing. They have all said the things that they've seen or felt or witnessed or been part of have been life-changing experiences.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's I think every interviewer had some form of personal experience, some more than others, and it's very noticeable in the comments. Let's see if I can just find a sort of an example. What I'm saying is that people in the comments, that's obviously what they enjoy most about the cases.
I think it's that connectivity, though, isn't it, between.
Yeah. Sorry. While I found it, so one from the interview with Joe Hickey Hall, which was she was talking about her own, the power of her own personal experiences, and so a very short comment from Shanlin Webb, who briefly mentions an experience of her, and she says, from my experience, it has made my life worth living, knowing that there is something else.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of common trope, isn't it? Not just in the comments that we're talking about, but the whole phenomenon of experiencing something outside of five sense reality. You can read about it until the cows come home and try to understand it, but it's only once it happens to you that things have changed. I suddenly have a different perspective on reality. And even the comments, some of the comments were saying, "Oh, I so wish I could have that experience." Which, I can see that perspective. But the people commenting who have had experiences, almost like that comment I just read out, it's changed their life.
Yeah, definitely. And I think having somebody else sit there and say, who are obviously, well, I say obviously, aren't lunatics. I'm just thinking of myself there. But saying I've had this experience and I want to share it with you. And I'm thinking about the recent video that I did without you. I'm so sorry that I did it without you. But it was about a personal experience that had happened to me a couple of days before. I was absolutely overwhelmed with people using then the platform, quite rightly using the platform of the comments underneath to tell their story of something incredibly similar, if not hallmark the same kind of encounter that I'd had. So from the perspective of, somebody saying this has happened to me, and somebody else going, it happened to me too, and I've not spoke about it, or there's nobody I can speak to about it. And I think that's something that's genuinely lovely about these kind of podcasts that comes out, that it gives a sense of, we can't all be mad, or maybe we can. Or maybe we're the mad ones and everybody else is whatever. But it's like it's a reflection, isn't it, in saying, this does occur, it does happen, and it's we can talk about it. I think that's the other thing, because the whole, the unseen and the other and the fairy and the supernatural and the paranormal are still very much taboo. In a sense that of being taken seriously. Even when you look at paranormal shows that are on telly, there is still that kind of element of it's entertainment, which I can understand that, for television purposes, that's absolutely fine. It would be nice to see these subjects taken a lot more seriously, and people's experiences being taken much more seriously. And that runs into No, I won't do the later guest. We'll do that later. So,
Yeah.
go on.
Just well, I don't know where you want to go next, but in terms of going back to the comments that we get on the videos, and I've said there's only one negative comment, which I will read out in a moment,
Please
just
do.
for some balance. But there have been not negative comments, but comments about people talking about the time that we have with our guests. Now, well, Kate can talk about the future in a moment, but up until now, we've been limited to the basic Zoom package, which is limited to 40 minutes before it cuts off. That's the free package, and you have to pay money if you want to extend it beyond 40 minutes. Kate can talk about that. But and I did find that people saying, "Oh well, why is it so short? Why did you cut the guest off at a certain level?" And as soon as either Kate or I explain why that is the case, they are, oh, sorry to, they weren't trolling, they weren't having a go at us, but that people do need to know that that's the reason why that 40-minute cutoff was the case, which is very, very difficult. I'd say with all of the guests, it would have been ideal if we'd have been able to go over an hour at the very least. So there were often, you'd just be getting into the deep dive of what they're talking about, and it's, oh, sorry, we've got to say goodbye now.
I know. It was incredibly frustrating for both of us. We're both chatty people, and we also like to listen to people and get a lot out of those kind of conversations. So we were equally frustrated with the time constraints. I don't know what happened, but when I first started Zooming, I don't know whether I should say this because we're on the internet, but I seem to have got through some kind of back door where it never cut me off after 40 minutes. And then after, I think it was probably about a year into using it, I don't know whether the terms changed with Zoom or whatever happened. So I made the executive decision because I love doing this. I know Neil loves doing this, and we feel as though our guests need to have the platform that they deserve and the time that they deserve. And you guys need to have what you want, and what you want is longer guest interviews. So we have bought the big Zoom package. So I'm just pre-warning you, we have 30 hours of recording that we can do. And that could be, we could do a marathon. No, I'm not. We're not going to do a marathon.
No, we're not.
But I think in terms of the future, what it means is we won't have to cut. I've personally felt very, very rude about having to count people down with the last 10 minutes because I can't listen to them properly. I've gone off track in that last sort of 10 minutes. It means now that we don't have to do that. We are going to be looking at keeping them around about the hour mark, and if they go over, they go over. It'll be to do with individual guests and how long that they have to give and gift us in time, really. But yeah, new for 2023, we are back big style.
Yep, no, that will be brilliant, and I think the guests will appreciate that as well. As long as we don't sort of, we're still sitting here 3 hours later.
We are going to do that. There's going to be that one guest that we will do that with.
Yeah, I can see if we get Dan Green back on, that'll be
brilliant.
That'll be a 3-hour one. So let me get this one out the way. Let me get the negative comment, and it's it's not being a nasty comment. It's just someone giving their opinion what they didn't like about the particular interview, and it's the first one with Dr. David Luke. Now, Dr. David Luke was talking, or we were talking mostly about experiencing fairy type entities after taking a psychedelic of various sorts. We went through a range of psychedelic experiences and the clinical trials that are being carried out and people's own anecdotal experiences. And as in my articles, I often quote David Luke when it comes to this subject matter, because he's one of the leading exponents of looking at this incredibly interesting phenomenon of what psychedelics can do to your perception and how entities often come into your perception when that happens. And so so we talked extensively about that. It's a fantastic conversation. He's an incredibly intelligent guy who is actually currently part of the team that are running the clinical trials into dimethyltryptamine, DMT, at the Imperial College in London, which I'm really looking forward to seeing the results from that, to see what comes out of that. As we've talked to on many times, DMT does have the tendency to not only blast you into another reality, but it is also often filled with fairy type entities.
Yeah.
And so in terms of what we're talking about, it's incredibly important. But so the comments were generally very positive, very interesting, very interested in what we were talking about. But we did have Annie 50 FUL, who said in her comments, he, David Luke, takes hallucinogenics, so I question his authenticity. Neil is right. Normal encounters are raw. I much prefer to listen to these encounters. I would like to ask David if he's had any encounters without drugs. Sorry, couldn't get to the end of the interview. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's a fair point.
It is a fair point.
There are people. I have found whenever I start talking about psychedelically induced states of consciousness, some people just don't want to go there.
Yeah.
They, to me, that's rather dogmatic but I can see where it's come from. I mean, psychedelics have been demonized along with drugs that can really do you harm, heroin, cocaine, for the last 40, 50 years. And at least 50 years. And so that's going to affect a lot of people's perception of those drugs, and they will usually go along with the reductionist materialist viewpoint that they're making you hallucinate. And well, I don't believe that. I've written quite extensively about why I don't believe that. We won't go into that here, but the commentator was perfectly, it was a polite way of getting her point across, that she doesn't believe psychedelics are capable of producing that kind of entity experience. And
I saw it from that point of view. When I read it, I didn't see it as negative, because I'm I'm very open, 50-50 on this, but I often say that that these states of tapping into the other realms can be learned, and can be learnt without the aids of plants, etc. And maybe that's where she was going with that comment. I viewed it as that has he had an experience that isn't the kind of what can be deemed as a quick access into having those experiences, because I know that there's a lot of purist type of people that would say, shamanic experiences can be induced through drumming or through singing or through dance or through meditation and that kind of thing. And there is a whole debate about, the purity of your experiences and stuff. And maybe that's one for the future that we could sit down and discuss and get somebody on. I didn't see that as a negative, and it's better than the last negative that always sticks in my mind, because I just think, what was that about? It was a couple of years ago, and somebody had written, I talk too much. They put Kate talks too much, and it was like, hold on, this is a podcast.
Yeah, what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they meant that I ramble too much. I am aware that I ramble. It's one of my quirks. If you hear, you'll get used to it. So I'm just going to go through a few of the comments that I picked out from just one or two of the ones that we did. So talking about, we did a very early one where we chatted about the case of the Woollerton gnomes. So that was just Neil and I that were talking about that. And one of our regular commenters, Left Hand Path, said they'd heard about a gnome encounter from a family member. So again, people were loving the fact that they could go, oh wow, you know, because you say the word gnomes, it kind of, it's a bit of a sludgy subject for people to take seriously. It's like treacle for people to take seriously. People do, and then they don't, and then they can, and then they can't. So
Yeah.
actually hearing that word gnome for that person obviously brought up those memories of the family. I did a book review on the lovely Rob Wildwood's Magical Britain book, which is I'm not just saying this because I know Rob. It is an amazing book. If you are a fairy hunter, you want to get out and you want to see places of mystical places, backgrounds, etc., then check out his book. Again, down below there is a video that I do that's got all the details on that. Somebody asked, have we had an interview with Tyler Deal? And that was Kathy Ray. Now, that's the first time that I've heard on the comments as somebody suggested that we look into getting a guest on through their comment. What I could say from that is, yeah, we would love you to make comment and say, you know, this person would be brilliant on the show. I think you get a lot out of them. Could you just give us a little more detail? You can find us both on social media, on Facebook particularly. You can find us there. So if anybody has suggestions, that would be absolutely brilliant. When we did, Neil and I again, we did introducing the fairies. One of the comments was, again, Persephone Lewis said, have you been able to contact anyone in Canada or the US on the little people? We do have guests from, I was going to say the over the pond thing again. I hate that saying. So we do have guests from the US and Canada. And they're always a pleasure, you know, from that neck of the woods. It's odd because there are obviously differences in the little folk and the experiences and the names and the terminology, but I haven't found from talking to our guests that there has been a massive rift in, you know, it's not just like the fairies in America are completely different to the fairies in Europe. You know, there's been little subtle things, but there's not been anything glaringly obvious.
Well, we talked about that, didn't we, with one of our guests from over the pond, Joshua Cutchin. It was our last guest, and we were talking about that there are certain differences between, especially something like if you count Sasquatch as
Yes.
fairy, you don't get Sasquatches in Europe, but you do in America. But like you say, for the most part, there was a correlation.
Yeah.
And obviously Joshua knows the European material very well, so
yes.
it's not as though he's coming from a purely US perspective. But talking to him, it was quite clear that, you know, there is a global phenomenon. And certainly reading his book, his new book, Ecology of Souls, he brings in examples from all over the world. And so I don't think that, you know, the issue about coming from a British or European or American perspective, I don't think that really is an issue. And we'd love to have some more Americans, as long as the time difference isn't too great, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I'm rubbish about getting the time difference right as well. It's like, oh, excuse me, are we forward? Are we back? Where are we? I think one of the things that I would like to do, and if there is anybody out there who who fall into this category, or you know somebody who falls into this category, is maybe talk to some people who are more inclined to look at deep traditions of a country. And I think I'm saying that, I'll explain why I'm saying that. Those that we've spoke to from America about fairies in America and Canada are from European lineage. And a lot of the fairy folklore went over with the Europeans. Now, what fascinates me is before European settlers, did native people have very, very different entities and energies, which I kind of suspect they may do, because I know off the top of my head, there's the skinwalkers. And the skinwalkers for me are very much in that realm of fairy. And we don't really have, I mean, I'm sure we do have equivalents, but not to the to the fear factor, I think, of a skinwalker. So if there's anybody out there who knows about that, wants to talk about that, and even in this country, you know, if there is really deep traditions that we are missing here, and I'm sure they're not, because that's why I've got Neil on board, because he's the brains of the gang. So I'm sure we haven't missed. And again, with Europe, if there's in Scandinavia, or you know, pockets of places where there are deep traditions, if you have been screaming at us going, you're missing out this X, Y, and Z when you're talking about that, please get in contact with us. Even if you don't want to chat with us on this platform, it would be great to open up those conversations. We're here to learn. You know, this is what we do. We're here to learn. So we're definitely open to that. Again, from that one, the introducing the fairies, where we were chatting, just doing an introduction into the fairies, because we hadn't done that before. Did you know that the fairies can take the form of dead relatives? And that was Colin who said that. And yeah, it's very much been a theme of things that we chatted progressively about during the interviews with different people, and it's something I think that will come up as a predominant theme this year. You know, I'm a paranormal investigator. I'm coming from sort of the ghost hunting perspective. You know, Neil's coming from the fairy, but the sort of the subconscious psyche kind of perspective. Death's going to be in there. Yeah, death will be floating around somewhere.
Well, hold on. Before you go on, that gives a perfect segue to another comment that I noticed. If we're talking death,
go on.
My favourite subject, it has to be said. And again, this is a comment on Joshua Cutchin's interview, where we were talking about exactly what you're talking about. Are the fairy, how are they related to the dead and to the ancestors? Is there a correlation? Well, yeah, there does seem to be, both in the folklore and in more sort of modern Fortean circles. So the comment was about Joshua talking about near-death experiences, which I think that's the only time we've really touched on near-death experiences. Something we could probably look at a little bit more. But once again, you know, as you say, a regular commentator with the pseudonym of Left Hand Path. I wonder what they're getting at, Left Hand Path, but whatever. They say, the NDE, the near-death experience, has always been a favourite topic of mine. It is amazing both in the experiences themselves and how scientism tries to cover it up as a dying brain or some such, which we talked about with Joshua. I have not often looked into connections with fairies or other phenomena with NDEs, though. It's certainly a fascinating topic of interest. And then going on to the other part of the discussion with Joshua about UFOs and the connections. I enjoyed the discussion on UFOs and fairy sightings being somewhat the same, translated by us into a form that we can understand. I've actually seen this happen for real. A friend of mine caught a very interesting anomaly on camera, and to me it was clearly a fairy type entity, whereas to him it was clearly a UFO. We both saw the same thing, but our minds linked it to our own areas of interest and forms we felt connected to. Really interesting. You know, that's a really interesting comment, and sort of aligns with what we were talking about in that particular interview. So thank you, Left Hand Path, whoever you may be.
Yeah, we do have some brilliant regular commenters, and I do feel very, very guilty about not sort of typing responses back. And I will tell you, I've said this before, I don't know how I ended up on the internet. I don't know how I ended up doing a YouTube channel, because I am the worst person with technology ever. And I fire up my laptop once a week and that's it. And I can't actually reply on my phone. It's my mum, who is like 70 odd year old, is better at technology than me. It's shameful. It's absolutely shameful.
No. I don't see a problem with that. It's I can tell you now that I don't even have a phone. Well, I do have mobile. It's like a dumb phone, not a smartphone.
Oh yeah.
So I don't even go there. Don't want to go. Not necessarily such a bad thing.
No, no, definitely not, definitely not. One of the things that people are picking up on, and I have seen a couple tonight, is the light anomaly phenomena that occurs around, and we have had it's not spring watch, it's orb watch, where people on the comments have said, at 3.36 minutes in, you've got a real kind of good one whizzing across. I was trying to explain it to somebody the other day and say, it's a phenomenon that happens quite often. Don't trouble yourself with it. It's just become a running joke with us that we don't even notice it anymore. It used to fascinate me, and now it's like, oh, there it goes.
Yeah.
We have had a couple tonight. So yeah, Charles Marlowe was really good, and he timelined some of that orb activity on a couple of the comments. So Charles, thank you very much for doing that, and do keep spotting those little orbies.
Yep.
Where'd you go from that?
That's yeah. It's I have to say it only happens to Kate. It doesn't happen to me. So Kate is more of a psychic tuning fork than I am. It's despite my own experiences and encounters, I'm not particularly psychically gifted, whereas Kate is, and so that's why I think that happens to you, but not to me. I
I
shouldn't
have
speak for
I have a
you know.
diff-
One day.
I have a different theory. I think it's like I don't know. I'm not going to go down. Yeah. Anyway, so the next comments, that moving on swiftly, is when we were talking to the lovely Dr. Jack Hunter, which was again one of those frustrating guests that we just got into the meat and bones of talking to him. And it felt very, very comfortable as all sat round. And we did have one lovely comment that said about that and I think it was also said about Joe Hickey Hall, which was lovely, about you guys work so well together when you sat around chatting with, or something along those lines. So yeah, it was under Jack Hunter as well. It said you three together are brill, and that was Trudy Morgan. And with all our guests, I felt very, very comfortable, and mind blown by, really. So there was another one on there that said, I've known most of this all my life, and I'm so glad it's finally getting the sensible debate it deserves. And that was Ray MacDonald. So
Yeah.
that was really lovely. And I'm not just reading out, the best bits of the comments. I did say to Neil quite recently, and I'm not putting it out there for you to start trolling us, but it's kind of like, where do the trolls go? It's like, yeah, I'm not putting it out there. But the thing is, as well, we are open to constructive criticism. This is a show that we want people to enjoy. This is a show we want people to feel like they can be interactive with. And with that in mind, in the future, we will be building. No, we're not building. We're going to be making a Facebook page specifically for people who watch this show. There will be times where Neil and I will be hanging around on that Facebook page so that we can answer questions or have a chat with you about your experiences, because I get really excited when people put their experiences down, and as I'm reading them, I'm kind of talking back to you all, and it'd be nice to have a bit more of an interaction. So if you guys think that that's a good idea, then please let us know. What other comments have you got, Neil?
Well, let's have a look. It's going to sound as though I'm reading out the same. No. That's not the one I want. Sorry. Here we go. Here we go. So the one on Dan Green with the Wallace and Gnomes.
Yeah.
Jane Robinson 7008 said, I have never stopped. Well, here we go. People like talking about their own experiences. Have never stopped seeing them. Just a part of my life. No big deal. They can be a pain sometimes, but most of the times they keep to themselves. Sometimes they get in the house, chase the cats, or play with them. Don't see them every day, and sometimes many appear. I have one particular one that is constant in the garden, unlike the others, and he will look at me straight in the face and smile, blink his eyes at me. I suppose we're used to each other now, but there are different types that show up. that was, I mean, that's just a typical example of someone saying, "Ah, yeah, you're talking about this. Yeah, no, I experienced that," and I kind of like that kind of the looseness
Mm.
of how she said, "Oh, yeah, no big deal.
Hmm.
What are you worrying about?" And it also reminded of my own experiences with Charles Bonnet syndrome, where because it's been happening so many years, and I experience fairy entities on a regular basis, it's become, I don't never take it for granted,
Mm.
but it's like, oh, right, here you are again.
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's just, there's no shock value there anymore. And so that comment, and there are several similar comments such as that, not just on that particular, not for the Dan Green episode, but for several of the episodes, of people saying, "Oh yeah, no, I've seen this. They hang out with me sometimes. There's nothing to worry about." I don't think I've seen any comments saying people are afraid of them.
Mm.
The fairies I'm talking about, obviously, it's which may happen in the
Yeah.
future. But I think people are more comfortable talking about positive experiences than frightening or perhaps creepy experiences, which we know happened.
Hmm.
But so I haven't actually seen any of those. Maybe again, as this subject becomes more and more talked about, as it has been over the last few years, people will become more comfortable about saying, "Well, this is an experience I had. It wasn't very nice. What do you
Hmm.
think?"
Yeah, I think with that, uh, that for me is a really interesting point, and I don't think it's so much that people don't want to talk about negative experiences with the Fae. I think that when you have negative experiences with the Fae, that oftentimes people don't know it's the Fae.
Yeah.
So they will put it down to maybe interactions with the dead, or they will maybe put it down to a demonic interaction, or some kind of toxic psychic interaction. And it's when we start looking at things from a different perspective and start saying to people, these are the kind of traits that the fairies do show. And it's not necessarily the other things that you've mentioned that you're encountering. I think then other people will start going, it wasn't a ghost, or it wasn't a demon, it was something from the Fae realm.
Mm.
And I think that will come about, and that was for me the whole wish of Harry and the Hawthorn, is that breadth of education that I can get, and that we can disseminate out to other people.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and well, that's a nice little segue onto it's the final comment
Yeah.
I've picked out, and this was on the Anthony Peake episode. I should just say that the Anthony Peake episode was a little bit different, wasn't it, than all
Yes.
of the others, because although Anthony has written his second, not his most recent book, but his second to most his penultimate book, um, was called The Hidden Universe, and that was talking about entity encounters of all types, and he does go into detail. He's written about fairy type encounters, but we were mostly talking about his new book called Cheating the Ferryman,
Yes.
which is about death, reincarnation of a very specific type that he has this hypothesis of. And Anthony's one of those guys who is the easiest person to interview. You just
Mm.
you just right, Anthony, is the question, off you go, and then you just sit back and listen to him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
It's
penny in the slot job, isn't
yeah,
it?
no, he's great. And he obviously does this all the time, so he
Mm.
knows exactly what he's doing. Yeah, but anyway, so there's a nice comment. It's slightly long. It'll only take me a minute to read it out from another regular commenter called Salvador Picasso, which is great.
Woo!
Is a great pseudonym. Um, and this is a kind of typical kind of comment where they're being very complimentary. They're fascinated with the ideas, and then, oh, and I've had this experience. So
Mm.
Salvador Picasso says, "Really pleased to have found this channel. Look forward to watching this. I got acquainted with Neil a few weeks ago after he made a comment about Charles Bonnet syndrome on a Thomas Sheridan video. I know a lady who was diagnosed last year with Charles Bonnet syndrome. I'm fascinated with her visions. I've only in recent years dipped my toes into the waters of unseen worlds, but the more I've paid attention to their existence, the more they show themselves to me. It's most definitely as if I am being shown a path. My grandson has recently, age 4, said some quite profound things to me. It was whilst staying with his mum, my daughter, a couple of days after communicating with Neil that I also had a very odd vision. As Neil said before, although I can envision what I saw, I struggle to explain my vision, so it's like ineffable.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot express how grateful I am that people are brave enough to speak about this. Thank you. So what a lovely message, and
Yeah.
as Kate said before, that's very heartening to hear people engaging with the subject matter that we're putting out, and also being uh, uh, giving themselves an allowance to talk about something that they might otherwise not have been able to talk about or thought they couldn't talk about.
Yeah, and that sounds like we're doing our job beautifully. I think we'll round it up and excuse me. Shall we round it up? I think the universe is saying that we need to keep on going. No, no, no. I mean, for me, excuse me, it's a big thank you to everybody for watching and engaging with us on different topics, and a massive thank you to all our guests over the last year. It's such a wonderful journey, and it's something that I know keeps me sane, being able to do these, and to speak to some magical people about things that they're passionate about as well. Neil, very very briefly, what's your wish list for Hare and the Hawthorn for this coming up year?
Well, the simple answer to that is to get more great guests on.
Yeah,
It,
ta-da!
it has to be. I should just say that it's not easy to do this. Not so much the actual interviews themselves, but arranging the logistics
Mm-hmm.
of getting people on board and getting the diaries in sync, and then there are cancellations and whatever.
Yeah.
So it's not just a case of, oh yeah, well we'll get these 12 people this
Mm-hmm.
year. It's not quite that simple, as anyone who does a podcast with other people will know. But I think that if we can perhaps get some new voices
Yes.
on over the next few months, and also perhaps bring back some of the guests that we've already had, those who are willing to come back. Now that they know that we're not limited to 40 minutes, they might be more happy to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and but I think we'll also continue. I mean, Kate and I have various little projects on the go, on the back boiler sort of thing, but
Mm-hmm.
about to be dragged to the front boiler,
Mm-hmm.
if you know what I mean. And so it will be good. I think that just us two just
Yes.
chatting about certain subjects will continue,
Yeah.
and that kind of is the sort of the glue that holds all of the other things together, isn't it? In terms of the guests,
Mm-hmm.
we can't we don't have the facilities to just have a guest on like every week, like
Yeah.
some bigger podcasts are able to do that, and they're
Mm-hmm.
able to have one or two guests. We can't do that, but where we can, we will get these interesting people, always obviously within the subject bubble.
Yeah.
We're not going to be start talking about geopolitics or anything like that. That's no, definitely not going to be start talking about geopolitics.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be within the subject bubble, and hopefully over the course of this of 2023, you're going to see as many good guests as we've had over the past 12, 14 months.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to put a shout out to everybody. If there, like I say, if there is anybody out there that you'd like us to interview, if you drop us a comment below, or pop over to our social media. Again, if you have had an experience that you're willing to come and sit on the virtual couch with us and talk through, we love to hear people's stories, from you directly. So if anybody is wanting to do that, then we're more than happy to arrange that as well. I think for me, that broad sort of spectrum, we're going to be keeping it as broad. I did say last year that one of the things that was fascinating me and still is fascinating me is fairy music. And that's something, if anybody knows anybody out there who is a little bit expert on that, or is willing to chat through that, I would like to actually talk to some musicians. I did have nearly persuaded somebody quite a while ago. I'm going to go back down that route and see if I can persuade them again to talk about the influences of the Fae on modern music, not sort of your quintessential violin kind of harps, etc., that kind of music, but on a more modern perspective. I would like to just see the same quality of guests this year. Definitely, definitely want to have some faces back on from the previous years, and I think it's going to be a good one this year. I know it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Sorry, the one other thing, subject matter, we almost every podcast we touch on it and say, oh, we must do more on this. Such an interesting subject, and we haven't actually done a proper podcast on it. And it would be good to get some sort of guest on, and that's looking at fairy entity encounters at prehistoric monuments.
Oh yes, definitely.
Because I'm an archaeologist, so I know quite a bit about these
Yeah.
These types of monuments, and my own first experience happened at West Kennet Longbarrow. So
Yeah.
so I can certainly talk about, but it would be good to have someone not from an archaeological perspective, because there's too many materialists in, they'll just be, oh, it's a load of rubbish. But it would be good to have someone who's maybe talking and writing about, say, ley lines, ley lines, and how that might correlate, energy pathways through these monuments, and why do so many experiences happen at those monuments. So there you go. There's one on the bucket list for 2020.
Yeah, we've been saying that for a good year now. That's definitely a subject that a part of this that we're both super passionate about, and yeah, that'd be brilliant. I just had a bit of a tagline then go across my head that said, "Have you come across a pixie portal in a stone circle? Then contact us."
Yeah,
and then a number coming across the bottom, ticker taping. Anyway, yeah. I think we said we were going to keep this to about 30 minutes. We've rambled. We are going to use the Zoom. We are going to use the Zoom unashamedly. So thanks again for watching, sticking with us, loving your comments, loving the fact that you are loving our work too. So stay tuned for this year, for 2023, and we'll see you very soon with our first proper podcast and hopefully proper guest. So thank you, and thank you, Neil.
Yep, thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Bye bye.